Picture this: a single cell, microscopic, invisible to the naked eye. Now imagine that cell, through an unbroken chain of survival, struggle, and adaptation, becoming you. Or consider this instead: a divine intelligence, infinite in power and wisdom, speaking you into existence with purpose and design. Two radically different stories. Both claim to explain the same thing: where you came from. One of these narratives has shaped your beliefs, your worldview, your sense of meaning. But have you ever stopped to examine why? Welcome to Logic Over Spirit. Today we're diving into perhaps the most profound question humanity has ever asked. Are humans created or evolved? This isn't just an academic debate. This question touches everything. It influences how we see ourselves, how we treat each other, how we understand suffering, mortality, and purpose. For some, the answer is found in ancient scriptures, in the divine breath of a creator who formed us in his image. For others, the answer lies in fossils, DNA, and the slow, beautiful, brutal process of natural selection across billions of years. We're going to examine this question from three angles: science, religion, and philosophy. We'll look at the evidence for evolution, the arguments for creation, and the deeper philosophical implications of both. We won't shy away from complexity, and we won't pretend there are easy answers where there aren't. But by the end of this video, you'll have a clearer picture of what each perspective offers, what it costs to hold it, and what it might mean for how you live your life. So let's begin this journey at the very foundation. What does science actually tell us about human origins? Chapter 1. The Scientific Case for Evolution. When Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species in 1859, he didn't just propose a theory. He ignited a revolution in how we understand life itself. Darwin wrote, "There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers, having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one, and that, whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been, and are being, evolved." But Darwin was working with limited evidence. He had no knowledge of DNA, no molecular biology, no radiometric dating. What he did have was careful observation. The beaks of finches, the wings of moths, the distribution of species across islands. From these observations, he inferred a mechanism: natural selection. Organisms vary. Some variations help survival and reproduction. Those helpful traits get passed on. Over vast stretches of time, this process produces the incredible diversity of life we see today. Now, here's what's remarkable. Every major scientific discovery since Darwin has confirmed and expanded his basic insight. We now have multiple independent lines of evidence, each pointing to the same conclusion. Let's start with the fossil record. We have transitional fossils showing the evolution of whales from land mammals, with species like Ambulocetus that had both legs and the ability to swim. We have Tiktaalik, a fish with wrist bones, showing the transition from sea to land. We have Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, showing the gradual development of larger brains, upright posture, and tool use in our own lineage. The fossil record isn't perfect, but the pattern is undeniable. Simpler forms appear first, more complex forms later, in a sequence that makes sense only if species are related by descent. Then there's comparative anatomy. Why do humans, bats, whales, and dogs all have the same basic bone structure in their limbs? A humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, phalanges. The same bones, arranged in the same order, modified for different purposes. This makes perfect sense if these species share a common ancestor. It makes far less sense if each was designed independently. Why would a designer use the same template for a human arm, a bat wing, and a whale flipper? But the most powerful evidence comes from molecular biology and genetics. DNA is like a historical document written in chemical letters. When we compare the DNA of different species, we find something extraordinary. The The pattern of similarities and differences matches exactly what evolution predicts. Humans share about 99% of our DNA with chimpanzees. We share slightly less with gorillas, even less with monkeys, even less with mice, and so on. The pattern forms a perfect tree of relatedness. More than that, we can see evolution happening in our own genome. We have broken genes that still work in other primates. We have viral DNA sequences inserted in the exact same locations as in chimpanzees, like scars from ancient infections shared by our common ancestors. We can even date when lineages split by counting genetic mutations, and those dates match the fossil record. Theodosius Dobzhansky, one of the founders of modern evolutionary biology, famously wrote, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution." And he was right. Evolution isn't just one theory among many. It's the organizing principle that makes sense of all biological data. It explains why bacteria develop antibiotic resistance, why flu vaccines need updating each year, why islands have unique species, why embryos of different species look similar early in development, why we have an appendix wisdom teeth and a backwards wiring in our eyes that creates a blind spot. The evidence isn't just strong, it's overwhelming. Multiple independent lines of inquiry, from paleontology to genetics to biogeography, all converge on the same answer. But does that make the case closed? Chapter 2. The Religious Perspective on Creation. For billions of people around the world, the question of human origins isn't primarily scientific. It's theological. And the answer is found not in laboratories or fossil beds, but in sacred texts that claim divine revelation. Let's start with the Abrahamic traditions. In Genesis, the first book of the Bible, we read, "Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being." This isn't presented as metaphor or poetry. For traditional believers, it's a historical fact. God created Adam directly, purposefully, in his own image. Later, from Adam's rib, God created Eve. Humanity didn't evolve from earlier primates. We were specially created, set apart from animals, given dominion over the earth. This view is echoed in the Quran. We created man from sounding clay, from mud, molded into shape. And in Jewish tradition, the special creation of humanity establishes our unique relationship with God, our moral responsibilities, our ultimate purpose. But creation stories aren't limited to the Abrahamic faiths. Hindu traditions speak of Brahma creating humans and all life. Norse mythology describes Ask and Embla, the first humans, formed from trees by the gods. Indigenous cultures worldwide have creation narratives that explain human origins through divine or supernatural action. What these stories share is intentionality. Humans aren't accidents of chemistry and time. We're here because we were meant to be here. We have inherent value, not because of our cognitive abilities or social complexity, but because we bear the mark of our Creator. Christian apologist William Lane Craig argues, if God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. Without God, there is no absolute right and wrong. For Craig and many others, evolution presents a problem not just scientifically, but morally and philosophically. If we're just the products of a blind, purposeless process, where does human dignity come from? Why is murder wrong? What makes human life sacred? This brings us to the concept of intelligent design. Proponents argue that certain features of living systems are too complex to have evolved through natural processes. The bacterial flagellum, a microscopic motor, has dozens of precisely coordinated parts. The human eye has intricate structures working in harmony. Biochemist Michael Behe calls this irreducible complexity, arguing that these systems couldn't have evolved gradually because removing any part makes them non-functional. Intelligent design advocates often quote physicist Fred Hoyle, who said, "The chance that higher life forms might have emerged in this way is comparable to the chance that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard might assemble a Boeing 747 from the materials therein." The implication: The complexity of life requires a designer. Religious believers also point to the fine-tuning of the universe. The fundamental constants of physics appear precisely calibrated to allow life. Change the gravitational constant by a tiny fraction, and stars couldn't form. Alter the strong nuclear force slightly, and carbon wouldn't exist. Is this coincidence or evidence of cosmic design? There's also the argument from consciousness and reason. We have self-awareness, abstract thought, moral intuitions, aesthetic appreciation. How does mindless matter produce minds? How do chemical reactions generate the experience of beauty, love, or transcendence? For many, consciousness itself points beyond purely material explanations. But here's where it gets interesting. Not all religious believers reject evolution. Many Christians, Jews, Muslims, and adherents of other faiths accept evolutionary science while maintaining belief in God. They see evolution as the method God used to create. Theistic evolution, as it's called, suggests that natural selection and divine purpose aren't necessarily incompatible. Francis Collins, director of the National Institutes of Health and an evangelical Christian, writes in The Language of God, "I find no conflict between what I know as a scientist about evolution and what I believe as a Christian about God's role in creation." Collins sees DNA as the language of God, a divine code that unfolds through natural processes. So the religious landscape is more complex than a simple rejection of science. But for traditionalists, there's a line that can't be crossed. If humans evolved from apes, if we share ancestors with every living thing, if there was no Adam and Eve, no special creation, then foundational doctrines are at risk. The fall, original sin, the need for redemption, all rest on a literal understanding of Genesis. This raises an important question. Is this debate really about evidence, or is it about what we're willing to accept? Chapter 3. The Philosophical Implications of Evolution. Let's step back from the scientific data and religious texts for a moment. Let's ask, what does it mean if evolution is true? What does it mean if creation is true? Because this isn't just a factual disagreement, it's a clash of worldviews with profound philosophical consequences. If evolution is true, humans aren't fundamentally different from other animals. We're smarter. We have more complex societies. We've developed language and technology. But we're not separate creations. We're apes. Highly successful apes, but apes nonetheless. Our ancestors lived in trees, walked on four legs, and had smaller brains. Go back far enough and we share ancestry with fish, with worms, with bacteria. This realization transforms how we think about human nature. There's no essential human essence dropped into us by a creator. Our traits, good and bad, are products of evolutionary pressures. Cooperation evolved because it helped survival. Violence evolved because it helped survival. Love, jealousy, empathy, tribalism, all have evolutionary roots. Philosopher Daniel Dennett calls evolution universal acid because it dissolves traditional certainties. If morality evolved, is it objective or just useful fiction? If consciousness emerged from matter, is there a soul? If our beliefs are shaped by survival advantages rather than truth-seeking, can we trust reason itself? Darwin himself grappled with this in a letter. With me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of the lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. This is the philosophical vertigo that evolution induces. Everything we thought was fixed and given turns out to be contingent and evolved. Philosopher Thomas Nagel writes, "I want atheism to be true, and am made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people I know are religious believers. It isn't just that I do not believe in God and naturally hope that I'm right in my belief. It's that I hope there is no God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be like that." Nagel's honesty is refreshing. There's a cost to accepting evolution. It means surrendering certain comforts. The comfort of knowing you're special, created with purpose. The comfort of believing death isn't final. the comfort of divine justice, where wrongs are ultimately righted. But evolution offers compensations. It offers truth, or at least our best approximation of it. It offers connection to all life, a deep kinship with every organism. It offers humility, the recognition that we're not the center of everything. And it offers a different kind of meaning, one we create ourselves rather than receive from above. Conversely, if creation is true, if we really are the products of divine intention, that has equally profound implications. It means the universe isn't indifferent. It means suffering has purpose, even if we don't understand it. It means morality is grounded in something beyond human opinion. It means death isn't the end. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard spoke of a leap of faith, acknowledging that belief in God requires going beyond what reason can demonstrate. But for Kierkegaard, that leap is what gives life meaning. Faith is the highest passion in a human being. Many in every generation may not come that far, but none comes further. So we have two fundamentally different ways of finding meaning. Evolution says, you're a pattern of matter that became conscious. You're rare and lucky. You're here because countless ancestors survived long enough to reproduce. Create your own purpose. Creation says, you're made in God's image. You're loved. You're here for a reason. Discover God's purpose for you. Neither science nor religion can tell you which kind of meaning is better. That's a choice you have to make based on what resonates with your deepest intuitions about reality. But here's the crucial question. Should our preference for a certain kind of meaning influence what we believe about facts? Chapter 4. The Problem of Evidence and Faith. Let's tackle something uncomfortable. When believers reject evolution despite overwhelming scientific evidence, what's really happening? And when skeptics dismiss religious experience despite millions of people reporting encounters with the divine, what's really happening? There's a fundamental disagreement about how we know things. Science operates on methodological naturalism. It looks for natural explanations for natural phenomena. It tests hypotheses through observation and experiment. It updates beliefs based on evidence. Crucially, it's provisional. Scientific conclusions can change when new data emerges. Faith operates differently. It begins with revelation, with scripture, with personal experience of the divine. These aren't provisional. They're foundational. As the book of Hebrews says, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Faith isn't weakness or irrationality in the believer's view. It's a different way of knowing, one appropriate to spiritual reality. But this creates an impasse. When scientific evidence contradicts Scripture, believers often reject or reinterpret the evidence. Not because they're stupid or dishonest, but because they trust their religious foundations more than scientific claims. Similarly, when religious people report miraculous experiences, skeptics explain them away through psychology, sociology, or neuroscience. Again, not from arrogance, but from commitment to natural explanations. Philosopher William James, in The Will to Believe, argued that in certain situations, we're justified in believing without sufficient evidence. If the matter is of profound personal importance, if we must choose, and if evidence is ambiguous, faith is reasonable. But is evidence about human origins really ambiguous? This is where intellectual honesty gets tested. If a young Earth creationist examines the evidence for an old Earth, radiometric dating showing rocks billions of years old, starlight from galaxies millions of light years away, must they accept it? Or can they reasonably maintain that God created the universe with the appearance of age? The appearance of age argument says God created Adam as an adult, not a baby. He created trees with rings, light already in transit from distant stars, rocks with radioactive decay patterns. It's possible. But it makes God a deceiver, planting false evidence. It means every scientific method we use to understand the universe is unreliable. And it's unfalsifiable, which means it explains everything and therefore explains nothing. On the other side, when materialist scientists claim consciousness is just neurons firing, that love is just oxytocin and dopamine, that religious experience is just temporal lobe activity, are they being fully honest? Are they explaining these phenomena or explaining them away? Can reducing something to its physical components capture the full reality of what it's like to be conscious, to love, to encounter what feels like transcendence? Philosopher Thomas Nagel argues in Mind and Cosmos that materialist explanations of consciousness are incomplete at best. He's not advocating for creationism, but he's pointing out that science hasn't explained everything. Consciousness remains deeply puzzling. The origin of life remains uncertain. The fine-tuning of the universe remains mysterious. So both sides have gaps. Both sides have questions they struggle to answer. But there's an asymmetry. Science acknowledges its gaps and works to fill them. It doesn't say consciousness is mysterious, therefore God. It says consciousness is mysterious, therefore more research is needed. Faith, by contrast, often fills gaps with God, then resists when science offers natural explanations. The history of this gap-filling is instructive. Diseases were once attributed to demons. We discovered bacteria and viruses. Lightning was once Thor's hammer. We discovered electrical discharge. Fossils were once Noah's flood. We discovered deep time and extinction. Each time, the natural explanation displaced the supernatural one. This pattern makes some believers retreat to unfalsifiable claims. God doesn't intervene in testable ways. He works through natural processes. He exists outside space and time. But this makes God functionally equivalent to no God at all, at least in terms of explaining the physical world. Yet believers respond. Your scientism is its own kind of faith. You assume nature is all there is, but you can't prove that. You assume natural laws are uniform, but that's an unprovable assumption. You trust your reasoning, but if your reasoning evolved for survival rather than truth, why trust it? These are fair challenges. And they bring us to a critical realization. Everyone operates with some foundational assumptions that can't be fully proven. The question is, which assumptions are most reasonable given everything we know? Chapter 5. Common Ground and Misconceptions. Before we go further, let's clear up some common misconceptions that poison this debate on both sides. Misconception 1. Evolution is just a theory. In everyday language, theory means guess or hunch. In science, theory means a well-substantiated explanation supported by vast evidence. Germ theory explains disease. Gravitational theory explains orbiting planets. Evolutionary theory explains the diversity of life. Calling evolution just a theory is like calling gravity just a theory. Misconception 2. Evolution says humans came from monkeys. No, evolution says humans and modern apes share a common ancestor. We're cousins, not descendants. That common ancestor was neither human nor chimpanzee nor gorilla. It was something else, now extinct, that branched into different lineages. Misconception 3. Evolution is random. Natural selection is non-random. Random mutations provide variation, but selection is anything but random. Traits that help survival and reproduction become more common. Traits that hinder them disappear. That's directed by environmental pressures, not chance. Misconception 4. There are no transitional fossils. False. We have thousands. Every fossil is technically transitional, showing a mix of ancestral and derived traits. We have beautiful sequences showing transitions between major groups: fish to amphibians, reptiles to mammals, dinosaurs to birds, land mammals to whales. Misconception 5. Evolution violates the second law of thermodynamics. The second law says entropy increases in closed systems, but Earth isn't a closed system. We have energy input from the sun. Locally, order can increase as long as overall entropy increases elsewhere. Life doesn't violate thermodynamics any more than a refrigerator does. Now for the religious side. Misconception 1. All Christians are creationists. Most mainstream denominations accept evolution. The Catholic Church, many Protestant denominations, Orthodox churches, all have made peace with evolutionary science. Young Earth creationism is primarily an American evangelical phenomenon of the last century. Misconception 2. Accepting evolution means rejecting God. Many scientists are believers. Kenneth Miller, a Catholic biologist who testified against intelligent design in court, sees no conflict. He argues God works through natural processes, that evolution is how God creates. Misconception 3. The Bible must be read literally. Even church fathers like Augustine warned against overly literal readings. Augustine wrote in the 5th century that Genesis should be interpreted carefully, that the days of creation might not be literal 24-hour periods. Literal interpretation is a choice, not a requirement. Misconception 4. Morality requires God. Secular ethical systems exist. Utilitarianism, virtue ethics, social contract theory all provide frameworks for right and wrong without invoking deity. You might argue they're less grounded than divine command theory, but they're not non-existent. Misconception 5. Evolution leads to immorality. There's no correlation between accepting evolution and behaving immorally. The most secular countries in the world, where evolution is universally taught, often have lower crime rates, less violence, and stronger social welfare than highly religious countries. Correlation doesn't prove causation either way, but evolution doesn't make people bad. So, where's the actual common ground? Both sides value truth, even if they disagree about how to find it. Both sides recognize that humans have special capacities worth protecting. Both sides want to understand our origins and our place in the cosmos. Both sides grapple with meaning, purpose, and how to live well. The difference isn't caring versus not caring. It's about which authorities we trust, which methods we think lead to truth, and which kind of explanation satisfies us. Chapter 6. The Personal Stakes. Let's get personal. Why does this matter? For most of human history, people didn't know about evolution. They believed creation stories and lived meaningful lives. So why can't we just let people believe what they want? Because beliefs have consequences. When school boards try to remove evolution from biology classes or give equal time to creationism, children receive inadequate science education. They're unprepared for careers in medicine, genetics, biotechnology, any field that depends on evolutionary principles. They're taught to distrust scientific consensus, which has ripple effects in how they think about climate change, vaccines, and other evidence-based issues. When religious communities ostracize members who accept evolution, they create environments where honest inquiry is punished. Young people face impossible choices: their faith or their intellect. Many leave religion entirely, not because evidence forced them, but because their communities wouldn't allow them to reconcile faith and science. On the other side, when secular people mock religious believers as ignorant or deluded, they create polarization. They miss opportunities to understand why creation narratives are so compelling, what human needs they meet. They demonstrate the same closed-mindedness they criticize in fundamentalists. This debate also affects how we approach other big questions. If you believe God created humans specially, you might see environmental destruction differently than if you see humans as part of an interconnected ecosystem. If you believe humans are just animals, you might think about animal rights differently than if you see a categorical difference between humans and other creatures. The question of origins influences bioethics. Is a fertilized egg a person made in God's image, or a clump of cells that might become a person? Your answer probably relates to how you think humans came to exist. It influences end-of-life decisions. If death is a transition to eternal life, you might make different choices than if you see death as final cessation. It affects how we think about human nature. Are we fallen beings in need of redemption, or evolved apes doing remarkably well given our heritage? Are our moral failings sins against God, or evolutionary baggage we can overcome through reason and effort. The implications for criminal justice, education, mental health treatment all follow from these basic assumptions. Perhaps most importantly, it affects meaning. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote, "Man's search for meaning is the primary motivation in his life. For many, meaning comes from knowing they're part of God's plan, that their lives have cosmic significance. Evolution threatens that meaning. If we're accidents, if there's no plan, if the universe doesn't care, where does significance come from?" But others find the evolutionary perspective liberating. Carl Sagan said, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself. We're stardust that became conscious, matter that developed the capacity to wonder at its own existence. That's extraordinary. We're not diminished by evolution. We're elevated, connected to everything that lives or has ever lived. The personal stakes are real. This isn't abstract philosophy. It shapes identity, community, purpose, how you raise your children, how you face death. That's why the debate is so passionate, so intractable. It's not really about fossils and DNA. It's about how we make sense of being human." Chapter 7. Can we bridge the divide? So here we are. Science overwhelmingly supports evolution. Religion, at least in its traditional forms, maintains special creation. Both sides are deeply entrenched. Is there any way forward? One approach is non-overlapping magisteria, a term coined by Stephen Jay Gould. Science addresses questions of fact. Religion addresses questions of meaning and value. They're separate domains that don't conflict because they're not talking about the same things. Science tells us how. Religion tells us why. It's an elegant solution, but does it work? Religious claims aren't just about meaning. Genesis makes factual claims about the origin of humans, the timeline of creation, the existence of a global flood. If those claims are false, you can't just retreat to their metaphorical without doing violence to the text and tradition. Similarly, science has implications for meaning whether it wants to or not. If humans evolved, certain theological claims become untenable. Original sin, the fall, the special status of humans, all require rethinking. You can't keep your theology unchanged and just add evolution on top. Another approach is theistic evolution. God creates through evolution. Natural selection is the tool God uses. This works for many believers. It preserves God's role as creator while accepting scientific findings. But it faces challenges from both sides. Conservative believers see it as compromise, diluting faith to accommodate secular science. Atheist scientists see it as unnecessary, adding God to a process that doesn't require him. There's also the possibility that we're asking the wrong question. Maybe created or evolved is a false dichotomy. Maybe reality is more complex than either pure naturalism or traditional theism can capture. Philosopher Philip Goff argues for panpsychism, the idea that consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality, not an emergent property of complex brains. Others explore simulation theory, proposing we're in a designed system, but not in the way religions imagine. These alternatives are speculative, but they remind us that human knowledge is limited. Both scientific materialism and religious dogmatism can be forms of overconfidence. Humility might mean acknowledging that the ultimate nature of reality exceeds our current understanding. But does that mean anything goes? Can you believe whatever feels right? Here's where intellectual integrity matters. You can have doubts, you can acknowledge mystery, but you can't ignore evidence without reason. If you reject evolution, you need to explain why virtually every biologist is wrong. If you reject the possibility of God, you need to explain the appearance of design, the existence of consciousness, the deep human intuition of transcendence. The most honest position might be, I believe X, but I understand why someone might believe Y, and I acknowledge the limitations of my own perspective. That's rare. Most people are certain they are right, and the other side is not just wrong, but morally or intellectually deficient. What if we approach this differently? What if we asked, what would change my mind? If you're a creationist, what evidence would convince you evolution is true? If you're an atheist evolutionist, what evidence would convince you God exists? If you can't answer those questions, you're not following evidence. You're rationalizing predetermined conclusions. The truth is, for many people on both sides, nothing would change their minds. Not because evidence is lacking, but because the stakes are too high. Abandoning young Earth creationism might mean losing your community, your identity, your relationship with God as you understand Him. Accepting God might mean surrendering your intellectual independence, your sense that you've figured things out on your own. These are understandable fears. But they're also signs that we're not truth seekers. We're tribe members, defending positions because of who we are, not what the evidence shows. And that's a problem, because reality doesn't care what we want to believe. The universe is however it is, regardless of our preferences. Chapter 8. Synthesis and the Way Forward. Let's bring this together. We've examined the scientific evidence for evolution. It's strong. Multiple independent lines of evidence, from fossils to genetics to comparative anatomy, all point to common descent. The mechanisms are well understood. The predictions are confirmed. Evolution is as close to scientific fact as anything can be. We've examined the religious arguments for creation. They're based on revelation, on trust in sacred texts, on the belief that God has communicated truth to humanity. They offer meaning, purpose, and moral grounding. They address questions science doesn't. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why is the universe comprehensible? What is consciousness? What happens after death? We've examined the philosophical implications of both views. Evolution challenges traditional notions of human specialness, but offers connection and humility. Creation affirms human dignity, but requires faith in claims that conflict with scientific evidence. So what's the verdict? Are humans created or evolved? The honest answer depends on what you mean by created. If you mean, did a supernatural being form the first humans directly from dust or ribs approximately 6,000 years ago? The evidence overwhelmingly says no. That didn't happen. Humans evolved from earlier primates over millions of years. Our ancestry is traceable through fossils and genes. We share biology, anatomy, and DNA with other apes because we're related to them. But if you mean, is there something beyond pure materialism? Is there purpose woven into the cosmos? Is there a ground of being that explains existence itself? Science can't answer that. These questions exceed its scope. You can accept evolution fully and still believe in God, still see the universe as meaningful, still find purpose in existence. Many do. The question isn't really science versus religion. It's, can you accept what evidence shows about the physical world while maintaining beliefs about ultimate reality? Can you hold evolution and faith together? Some people manage it. Francis Collins, Kenneth Miller, countless others integrate evolutionary science with Christian faith. Others find the integration impossible, choosing either fundamentalism or atheism. What you choose depends on your priorities. If truth means accepting the best available evidence regardless of consequences, evolution is undeniable. If truth means remaining faithful to revelation and tradition, creation makes sense. If you're willing to reinterpret tradition in light of evidence, theistic evolution works. If you're comfortable with mystery and uncertainty, agnosticism is reasonable. But here's what I would suggest. Whatever you believe it honestly. Don't pretend evidence says something it doesn't. Don't reject science without engaging with it seriously. Don't dismiss religious experience without trying to understand what it offers millions of people. Don't claim certainty where you have doubt. Don't protect your beliefs by avoiding challenges. The philosopher Bertrand Russell said, "I would never die for my beliefs because I might be wrong." That's the spirit of honest inquiry. Hold your convictions, but hold them loosely enough that new evidence can reach you. Be willing to be wrong. Be willing to change your mind. That's not a weakness. That's integrity. And remember, this isn't just an intellectual exercise. People are listening. Young people are watching how we handle disagreement, uncertainty, and challenge. If we model tribalism, close-mindedness, and certainty, that's what they'll learn. If we model curiosity, humility, and genuine search for truth, we give them something better. Conclusion. So, are humans created or evolved? After examining evidence from science, arguments from religion, and implications from philosophy, here's what we know. The scientific case for evolution is overwhelming. Multiple independent lines of evidence converge on the conclusion that humans evolved from earlier primates through natural selection over millions of years. This isn't speculation or ideology. It's based on observation, experimentation, and inference, the same methods that gave us modern medicine, technology, and our understanding of the universe. But accepting evolution doesn't necessarily resolve the deeper questions. Why is there a universe at all? Why is it comprehensible? Why do we have consciousness, moral intuitions, aesthetic experiences? Science describes processes, but doesn't address ultimate meaning. That's where philosophy and potentially religion enter. The challenge is integration. Can you accept evolutionary science while maintaining religious faith? Many people do, seeing evolution as the method God employs. But this requires reinterpreting Scripture, which some believers accept and others reject. What's clear is that honest engagement matters. Whatever your conclusion, it should be based on genuine examination of evidence and arguments, not tribal loyalty or fear of consequences. The truth about human origins matters because it affects how we understand ourselves, how we treat each other, how we approach other questions about reality and meaning. Perhaps the wisest approach is epistemological humility. We know a lot. Science has revealed extraordinary things about the natural world. But we don't know everything. Consciousness remains puzzling. The origin of the universe raises questions physics can't yet answer. Whether there's something beyond the physical remains open. So investigate, question, challenge your own beliefs as rigorously as you challenge others. Be willing to be wrong. That's how we grow. That's how we get closer to the truth. And in a world full of certainty and dogmatism, that kind of honest searching is exactly what we need. If this exploration has challenged you, good. Sit with that discomfort. It means you're thinking seriously about important questions. Here's what I want you to do. First, examine your own beliefs. Ask yourself, why do I believe what I believe about human origins? Is it because of evidence or because of identity and community? What would change my mind? Be honest with yourself. Second, engage charitably with the other side. If you're religious, read about evolution from actual evolutionary biologists, not creationist strawmen. If you're secular, read about theology from serious theologians, not Reddit atheists. Understand the best versions of views you disagree with. Third, share this conversation. This video is meant to foster genuine dialogue, not to win debates. Send it to someone you disagree with and ask what they think. Have real conversations where you listen more than you argue. Fourth, subscribe to Logic Over Spirit if you want more content that tackles difficult questions honestly. We don't shy away from complexity. We don't pretend there are easy answers. We examine evidence, arguments, and implications from multiple perspectives because that's how we get closer to truth. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. Are you convinced by evolutionary science? Do you maintain faith in special creation? Have you found a way to integrate both? Let's have a real discussion, not a shouting match. And remember, it's possible to disagree profoundly while still respecting each other as fellow humans, trying to make sense of this strange, beautiful, confusing existence we share. Thanks for watching. Keep questioning, keep learning, and never stop seeking truth wherever it leads.